we take a shot at it? We went out to a meeting at a lodge, the county FOP lodge. A lot of retired police officers that had plenty to drink. I made my pitch. One old boy in the back who was drunk as he could be said, "Senator, I don't like you, and I don't like Sloan." I said, "Well, you're going to be happy because one of those son of a bitches is going to lose." I did get their endorsement, by the way.
Oh, that's tremendous. So just one more thing on politics. The transformation in Kentucky's been really at every level, from the way we vote nationally to judge executive races. You have spent a lot of time since that first race, recruiting candidates, supporting the party, helping people as they run. What do you think has helped lead that shift in Kentucky's voting patterns and from top to bottom?
Well, one thing I've periodically said in a number of different cycles is the most important thing is candidate quality. You can't just nominate anybody and expect to win in November. And what we had as a result of having virtually no structure, we had no farm team. We had to beg people to run for governor. Now we have the primaries for governor, but because we had virtually nobody around. I think the year I was elected to the Senate, just to go back to where we stood then, I think we had maybe 23 members of the State House. My colleague Jim Bunning was the minority leader of the State Senate. He was elected 5-4. County judges, 100 out of 120. All the way down to county clerks. I mean, it was the entire establishment. Mm-hmm. So your question is what changed it?
Yeah.
The role I tried to play, and I think was helpful, not the only reason, get better candidates.
Yeah. And
better candidates like to think they have a chance of winning. Mm-hmm. So the first breakthrough was to take the state Senate, and it was 21-19, I think, and we kept making progress. And I think one of the things that really helped was because the Democrats kept on looking more and more and more like an East Coast California party with people they didn't have anything in common with. I think Barack Obama continued that trend. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, it just kind of took off. And I think Obama's biggest mistake from a Kentucky point of view was he was perceived as the war on coal. And no matter how you feel about climate change, coal, believe it or not, is something Kentucky was very proud of. And the people who worked there couldn't find anything else to do after the mine closed. And that completely changed eastern Kentucky. I mean, Pike County, for example, I think the first time I ran, I got 40% of the vote. Last time I got almost 60. And below the statewide races everywhere. So I think it's been a combination of things. Yeah. And you've seen this same movement all across the central part of the country. The view that the other guys are just talking about stuff that's unrelated to my life.
Yeah. If you're looking forward and you're thinking, what does the Republican Party need to do, whether Kentucky or in those places where they've been successful all around the country, to make sure they maintain that or keep the position they have, what are the things that you think the party needs to be focused on to make sure that that the party stays in that position?
Yeah, well, I'm a little bit of a troglodyte. I'm still a Reagan Republican. I still believe in free trade, strong national defense. On the defense issue, one of the things that I constantly remind this new sort of isolationist people that are very much in the government and surrounding the president. At the height of World War II, let's first just look at the money part of it. At the height of World War II, 37% of our gross national product was spent on defense. 37%. In Korea, 13%, in Vietnam, 9%. The Reagan buildup, only 6%. They won't mess with you if they don't think they can get away with it. It's as simple as that. And if you look at the nature of the threat now, it's quite coordinated and quite international. North Korea, Germany, Russia, China, Iran, and Iran's proxies. This is a serious threat reminiscent of the period before World War II. Now, my personal view on the tariff thing is it doesn't really help to get involved in a bunch of disputes with all of our allies who we're going to need to be enthusiastically on our side. I want to congratulate Vladimir Putin. He's helped make my point. The Europeans have really awakened. 2 new members of NATO, Sweden and Finland, increased expenditures, total change of German politics, total change. Germany and Japan after World War II became basically passive. Well, they're breaking out of that now. And for the Japanese, given what happened to them, it's doubly challenging. But they're heading our way, and they're heading our way, in my view, because they've figured out that you can be an isolationist, but that doesn't mean they're not going to leave you alone. You can hide out at home. They're still coming after us. Because the one power in the world that they all despise is us.
Well, and it seems like that the conversation, we can transition to talk about some of the things going on in Washington, but it seems like that the conversation overall has shifted on this point of foreign policy and how we conduct ourselves. You and I did one of these talks maybe about a year ago, and you were definitely swimming against the tide at that point in time. It looks like the Republican Party and a lot of others in Washington have turned back around, or maybe more in line with what you've been talking about this entire time.
Well, I think I'm still outnumbered. But, you know, facts are an inconvenient thing. And the president did 2 things recently that I think give me hope that he may be figuring this out. Dropping the bomb on Iran was the right thing to do. We left at least one of those facilities in a pile of rocks. That's a good way to send a message. And number 2, he's re-engaged trying to help Ukraine. So I think, he's surrounded by isolationists. Yeah. He is, both in the White House and at the Defense Department. But he's also having to deal with the facts. The facts.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I haven't given up hope that he's going to get into a better place.
Yeah, and I guess we'll see here over the next week as the meeting with Putin takes place, and we'll see if he continues moving in the right direction.
Well, this guy Witkoff has had a lot of meetings with Putin.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing's come of them so far, so we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. As it relates to domestic policy, there has been a lot going on in Washington on the domestic policy front. we all watched over the last few months as Congress went through the one big beautiful bill. Did you pick the name of that piece of legislation? One of the good things in that, one of the many things in that are noteworthy, the 2017 tax cuts, which you championed whenever you were party leader. What do you think the impact of those tax cuts being now permanent is on the economy? What do you think the impact of that piece of legislation overall is going to be on the economy?
Well, I think there are two things that ought to comfort American business, which is nervous about the tariffs at the moment, but moving away from tariffs. Permanency on tax is a great way to plan the future. Mm-hmm. Number two, it wasn't the tax cuts that increased the deficit.
Right.
It's actually increased the revenue as a result of lowering the tax rates. But the debt is a big problem. And most people don't understand what and I'm not criticizing them for not understanding, it's kind of complicated. But how much do we vote on every year? Of all the money that the government spends, how much do we vote on every year? 28%. The big expenses, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and interest on the national debt, which is now as big as the Defense Department. So, an honest answer, which both sides have been reluctant to deal with because of the popularity of three of those that I mentioned, is unless you have some kind of adjustment on the entitlement side, you can't ever solve this problem. You could wipe out the 28%, we'd still have a problem. So, it's, in fact, the last really historic move of significance on any entitlement was Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill. This was so long ago, I wasn't there yet. Most of you think that I helped George Washington lay the counters. Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill agreed to raise the age of Social Security from 65 to 67, which is the last adjustment of any consequence on any entitlement program. Entitlement means we don't vote on it. It's locked in. And until one of two things happens, either we end up with a president and an opposition leader who agree, like Reagan and O'Neill. I was running for the Senate the next year, it never even came up. Since they did it on a bipartisan basis, it took it away from the political environment. And I went through the whole campaign, whoever asked me, I would have voted on it.
So is there a point where Congress has to act on that challenge?
That's the other option. Everybody assumes something really bad's going to happen here at some point. That's the single biggest disappointment of my public service is the lack of willingness on both sides to tackle what one of our former chiefs of staff said about 10 years ago. They asked him what the biggest national security threat was.
Yeah.
He said the debt.
It looks increasingly like he was correct. It's just a question of when, I guess, when Congress will have to act. Let me ask you about something else that's really close to your heart. Rich mentioned in the beginning the work that you did for the federal judiciary. Over the last 5 years, the Supreme Court has gotten rid of Chevron deference, overturned Roe, done things to limit the power of the EPA, done things to protect religious liberty. There's a long list of other things that we could go through. How have you felt about what the court has done over the last 5 years? Has it gone better than you expected it to go?
I had been leader of my party for 8 years. I was beginning to think I'd never get to be the majority leader. Let me explain to you the difference between being the majority leader and the minority leader. Majority's better. And majority is better because the majority leader of the Senate decides what we're going to do, whether you're going to take up something at all, and frequently whether it's amendable or not. So in 2014, I had the experience I'd been hoping to have, and one of the high points of my career was the day after the election in 2014. We went out to U of L at the McConnell Center to do it, but there were reporters from everywhere. And I thought to myself, well, it finally got here, but this is not just about bragging rights. What are you going to do with it? And on most political issues, they go up or down depending upon who wins the election. And I thought to myself, what can last the longest time? And what is made possible by the surprise victory of Donald Trump as well, and judges were at the top of the list. I wouldn't go to me for a simple will, although I did go to law school, but I've been surrounded throughout my career, fortunately, by extraordinarily bright legal minds. I give you my first experience. You have to go all the way back to the 70s before I got elected here. I had a mid-level, not very important job at the Justice Department during the Ford administration. I got to go to the staff meetings in the morning, and every staff meeting had sitting there Nino Scalia, who was the Office of Legal Counsel, Robert Bork, the Solicitor General, and Larry Silberman, the Deputy Attorney General, whose sister lives here. I never opened my mouth. I've been around such brilliance and such humor, and I didn't want to open my mouth and say something stupid. So that's the first time I met Nino Scalia. Well, 10 years I'm in the Senate, and he's nominated for the Supreme Court. And we sort of, he was certainly not my best friend or anything like that, but we had a cordial relationship. And I think he taught us all what strict construction means, and developed a following. I think it began with Federalist Society groups at Chicago, where Scalia was, and Yale, where Bork was, and just kind of developed over the years. And so the reason I told you all that is the biggest decision of my entire career dealt with Nino Scalia. He died in February of 2016. As I just pointed out to you, the majority leader gets to decide what we do. And I didn't know who the nominee of our party was going to be, but I said, this nomination will be filled by the next president. I got all kinds of grief saying, Hillary Clinton's going to win this thing. All you're doing is, Obama did, made his nomination, and I recommended, basically insisted that we have no process at all, no hearings, no meetings, no nothing, because it's not about the nominee. It's about who makes the nomination. So, you know the rest of the story. We hold the Senate, which is not easy. We finally flipped the state house here in Kentucky, which has been a long time coming. And Donald Trump, who used to do fundraisers for Democrats, is the president of the United States. So, Nino Scalia passing led to the biggest decision I've made. And you know how that turned out. We ended up with not only Neil Gorsuch, but also Brett Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett. And Justice Ginsburg died in September of the election year. We were in the middle of COVID. Query, could we pull this off before the election? Because we didn't know who was going to win. Trump might not win, and he didn't. We might not hold the Senate. We ultimately did not. I felt like if both of those things were obvious before November, we certainly couldn't fill this vacancy, having just been repudiated by the voters. So we had to pull this off in a record short period of time. Excuse me. We managed to confirm Justice Barrett the Monday before the election, 8 days before the election. We also did 53 circuit judges, men and women who think their job basically is to call the balls and strikes and not to be a player. And I think that'll have the biggest long-term impact on the country. And so that's why I picked it. I thought this would last longer than anybody else, that it was important and worth doing, and I was in a position to do it. We also, in selecting circuit judges, we're looking for high-quality people. Two of them are sitting right here, Justin Walker and John Bush. And we were trying to replicate that kind of talent all across the country, and I think we made a positive difference.
I think it worked out. Okay, before we close, I'll do some rapid fire questions. You can answer them with, you have to answer all of them though. But you can answer them with one word, you can answer them as long as you want. So I just have a few, okay? What is the best piece of political advice you ever received?
Oh, unfortunately, I already mentioned it. David Jones' advice, focus.
Yeah, that's good. You're famously a very big University of Louisville football fan. We're only about a month away from football season. How many football games is the University of Louisville going to win this year? You have to answer it.
8 or 9.
Okay, 8 or 9. Everybody remember that. I think they could get to 10, by the way. They could get to 10.
It could be better.
Yeah.
Well, if I may elaborate just a minute.
Hey, we're here for you.
It's pretty hard to predict. You can have an entirely different team every year. I mean, it's certainly not dull, but the coaches must be going nuts.
Yeah. Which of your Senate colleagues is the funniest?
John Kennedy from Louisiana. He is a hoot, and not only publicly, but even funnier in private.
What is one book that every American should read?
Goodness. This reflects my own reading habits, which are almost always about American history. I like Eric Larson's last one, which has a really funny name, The Demon of something. I can tell you what it's about quicker than I can tell you what the title was, because it's really quite an unusual title. What he did is he wrote an entire book about the period between Lincoln's election and his assassination. 4 months. Brilliantly written. Maybe you're not all that interested in that period, but it was an extraordinary period in our history where it wasn't at all sure, once we went into that war, how it was going to turn out. So that would be my recommendation.
It's a good one. Okay, this one, remember, I said you have to answer. If you had to have dinner with one of your former opponents, who would you choose to have dinner with?
Well, I think probably Amy McGrath.
Really? That could
Yeah.
happen.
You know, they spent $100 million trying to beat me in the last election. $100 million. I think in the 1984 race, I spent $1.8 million in the whole race. But if I may brag a bit, I won by 20 points, carried 117 out of 120 counties. Didn't carry Jefferson County, which is really not a place that's very friendly anymore. But yeah, I like her. At least I think I would like her. I don't really know her.
Maybe she would pick up the check.
Yeah, I hope so.
Last question. What makes you most optimistic about America?
The guardrails. By that I mean the Constitution. And one of the reasons I was really, really upset, both publicly and privately, about what happened on January 6th was that it was designed to prevent the orderly transfer of power, which had always happened in our country, including in 1876 when it was quite challenging. And there's a difference, it seems to me, between pushing the envelope and tearing down the guardrails. The president, like all presidents, is ambitious. They frequently get tired of the process because it gets in the way. The most conspicuous example of this in the first Trump term, I mean, obviously I wanted him to be a success, but he didn't like the filibuster because the filibuster empowers the minority. And so he said publicly, why don't you get rid of the filibuster? And I said publicly, no. And so he did it repetitively. And I said, no, no, no. What I was trying to do is protect the institution. Fully understood why he'd like to run over the institution to get done what he wanted to get done. But sometimes the guardrails are there for a good purpose. And the filibuster, which means you have to get more than just your number, I think saved the country from a whole lot of really bad stuff over the 42 years I will have been there.
All right, Rich, I know that we have a gift if you want to join us on the stage, but in the meantime, while Rich is coming up, please join me in thanking the greatest champion.
Senator McConnell, that was maybe your 31st tour de force after Fancy Park. Thank you so much for coming. We just are bursting with pride that you represent us and have for so many years with such decency and integrity and honor. And as a small token of appreciation, we have an autographed bottle of Woodford Reserve from Chris Marks, who might be here, master distiller. There he is. And also thanks to our member,